Story title: Ruthless Billionaire Destroyed Lives Until He Faced the Wrong Woman. What happened? Before Lagos woke, before the Danfos roared like restless yellow beasts, before the lagoon caught fire with morning sun, Ruth was already walking. Her slippers struck the cracked tar rhythmically, carrying a sound both steady and tired. Around her, the city stirred with exhaust fumes and vendors' cries. A tray of groundnuts balanced on her head, heavier than it looked, pressing into her neck as though life itself wanted to break her. Her eyes carried no gold, no diamonds, but a sharpness that refused to die. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Dust stained her wrapper. Yet she walked tall. In a city where men in tinted jeeps sped past, laughing at traffic while rolling down windows to spit out disdain, Ruth belonged to the ones who struggled unseen. And among those men was Julian Cole, Lagos's arrogant billionaire. His tower stabbed the sky in Victoria Island. His cars clawed Decoy. His laughter echoed in Banana Island halls. To him, the poor were dirt, and Ruth, he had already crushed once. Her mother's tiny shop in Suralere was bulldozed for his estate project. The memory still burned. That morning, Ruth whispered to herself, "One day I won't bow." But poverty is a stubborn shadow. It followed her back home, to a one-room apartment where the zinc roof leaked and the air smelled of kerosene. On a wooden shelf sat her old torn school bag, still holding exercise books she could never finish. Once, she dreamed of university. That dream collapsed the day her father's lungs gave up in a public hospital because the oxygen tank was reserved for those who could pay. She had stood helpless, clutching her mother's wrapper, watching him fade while nurses looked away. Her mother, Mary, kept saying, "Child, we may be poor, but we won't lose our hearts." She hid her tears inside her scarf, but Ruth saw. She carried those tears like fuel, each one turning into a vow. Still, in the middle of the struggle, life offered Ruth a spark. It was in a small church near Yaba, under a cracked cross and peeling paint, where she first noticed Michael. His shirt was worn but clean. His voice, when he led hymns, carried something golden, strong enough to soften a weary soul. Ruth, clutching her torn hymn book, stared in silence. After service, Michael smiled at her. "Good morning, sister. You carry strength in your eyes." It was the first time in years Ruth felt seen. Not as a hawker, not as a poor girl, but as a woman with dignity. From then, their paths crossed more. They would sit by the lagoon bridge, sharing roasted corn, their laughter mixing with the city's chaos. Michael would tell her softly, "One day, Ruth, your story won't be pain. It will be power." But Mary, watching from a distance, warned her daughter, "Be careful, my child. Gold that shines too bright can burn your hand. Even kindness can hide a wound." Ruth listened, but her heart had already chosen to believe in light. Then came the storm. Julian Cole announced a new project, a luxury estate that would erase Ruth's entire neighborhood. Bulldozers rolled in. Mothers screamed. Babies cried. Walls collapsed like paper. And in the chaos, Ruth froze, because standing beside Julian, clipboard in hand, was Michael. The man who sang hymns of hope, who promised her light, was his personal aide. She overheard his words one night outside the site office, his voice sharp, cold. "She's just another street girl, sir. Don't worry about her anger." The ground shattered beneath her. Corn spilled from her hands. Her throat closed. She wanted to scream, but only silence came. The man she trusted most had chosen wealth over her. For days, Ruth disappeared. Neighbors whispered that grief had broken her mind. But behind closed doors, she was learning. Sitting in a pro bono lawyer's office in Suralere, she listened, observed, wrote notes with trembling fingers. She discovered papers, leases, laws. Her people had rights Julian never thought they knew. Night after night, she walked home in rain, soaked but determined. Her eyes no longer held tears, only fire. She whispered to herself, "I will not bow. Not again." The day of reckoning came in court. The room smelled of dust, sweat, and polished wood. Julian entered with arrogance, his expensive lawyers marching like soldiers. Michael walked behind, avoiding Ruth's gaze. He looked smaller now, his shoulders heavy with shame. Ruth stood to speak. Her frame was small, her dress borrowed, but her voice cut through the silence. She laid out papers, testimonies, photographs. Every word trembled, but every word struck. Julian smirked at first, but the judge's expression shifted. Evidence of forged permits, illegal seizures, corruption, all exposed. By the end, the ruling was clear. The demolitions were unlawful. The community had won. Gasps filled the room. Ruth didn't cheer. She stood silently, her hands shaking, tears sliding down not from weakness but from dignity restored. That evening, Julian sat alone in his Banana Island mansion, walls of glass surrounding him like a cage. Billions in the bank, yet no peace in his chest. The poor girl, he mocked, had stripped him of arrogance in front of the world. Michael tried to reach Ruth, but her heart no longer beat for him. Betrayal had burned too deep. Instead, a quiet bond grew between Ruth and Toby, one of the young lawyers who had stood by her side. Toby didn't promise stars. He didn't sing golden hymns. He simply showed up, day after day, steady real. Months later, Ruth welcomed Toby into her small home. Mary was there, stirring jollof on a charcoal stove, the smell filling the room. On the table lay a new red school bag Ruth had bought for neighborhood children. "This is the life I choose," she said softly. "Not riches, but roots." Mary touched Toby's shoulder, smiling with tears in her eyes. "Now I see, my child. You have found someone who does not just see your beauty, but your worth." Outside, rain finally stopped. The air smelled of wet earth, clean and new. Ruth closed her eyes and, for the first time, felt peace. The arrogant billionaire had money, power, towers of glass. But Ruth, the girl with torn slippers and a broken school bag, had won the only thing that mattered: dignity, love, and freedom. And that was a victory no wealth could buy.